Last week we started the Hilchos Maaser, and we discussed that the Chiyuv Maaser differs from the Chiyuv Tzedakah in different ways. I'll see a little bit, and Chiyuv Maaser is a machlokes if it's part of regular tzedakah, or it's a separate Chiyuv Maaser. We went through the Chava, the Ramah. I just left that one point which I'd like to mention, is that we mentioned early in the beginning that so we had a machlokes, maybe the Rambam is mashal, maybe the Mechaber, that it's a regular Chiyuv tzedakah, which means only if there's aniyim that you have to give it. But if there's no aniyim, there's no Chiyuv tzedakah. If there's no aniyim, you just give a fruit or whatever you do, a shlish shekel, we said, for the whole year. There's no aniyim in front of you. Today it's not so common, there shouldn't be aniyim in front of you, but at least maybe not that much that I have to give my full maaser. You know, I gave out to the aniyim and then there's nobody left. But if it's a Chiyuv Maaser, a Maaser is a separate Chiyuv which I have to set aside, and I'll distribute it somehow. But I have to set it aside, like every Maaser, I have to set aside. And then we had another shiloh where the Maaser goes, if it has to go to Dafka Aniyim, or it could go to any Yonei mitzvah, you know. And again, it was another machlokes. And well, Maaser, we said, since Maaser Ksofim is a minhag, so according to Moshitas, we paskin it's a minhag. So one could, when he originally is mekabel upon himself to minhag, that he's doing it not to give it dafka to aniyim, but he could give it to support other institutions that are under the gather of a mitzvah, Talmud Torah and others. The only question I have is that the Grain says, and the Hilchos Chaim brings it down, that the one of the purposes of separating Maaser is that when an ani comes to you, at least you know, if I gave Maaser already, I don't have to give. I'm potter for my chiyuv. You know, a chaimish, going holds a chaimish, potter for my chiyuv. Well, if it's a Maaser, a chaimish, I reached my limits on potter. Rather than if you don't take off Maaser, so then you're not potter for my chiyuv. When an ani comes to you, so then you have all these lavim that maybe you have to give him if he's a real ani. So that's a person has a cheshbon. He took off Maaser. He's patterning himself from many Yisurim throughout the year. That's what they're going right. And I don't know how that applies if the Maaser is used for other things also. It's not just used. It's used to buy a nice vestrik like we discussed last week. If you can use it for that, or for different mitzvahs, svarim that everybody's using. So does that pater him from the Chiyuv tzedakah? I wasn't sure how that works. Al Kapanim, this was we discussed. So I'd like to go into a few inyanim here. And Maaser. The first one is, what's my? How do you? What do you take off Maaser on? What's the chiyuv? Who's included in this chiyuv to take off Maaser? So we started off in the beginning, and we mentioned that the first kedima for tzedakah is a person himself. He's the first kedima. And then, then we move on to the others. So since he's kaidim l'chol adam, so the first thing is he has to be making enough to make ends meet. He has to be making enough. So a person that's struggling, he's not making enough, so he's not in the parsha of the Chiyuv Maaser. He doesn't think of Maaser, because tzedakah has to go to himself. For himself is first. Now we mentioned back then that it's unclear what's called that he has enough. The Shulchan says, okay, if you have dry bread and maybe you have enough. But Maaser, it seems that the consensus of the poskim is that if a person's living on normal standard, not the luxuries, but the normal standard that a person has to have a place to live, so he's allowed to buy a house. So Shiloh in the schools, the tuition boards, they ask you, you buy your house, I don't know what the Bayit's tuition thing is, the membership thing is, but they have different, to help you out. So they ask questions. You rent, you buy. So the question comes up like this: if a guy buys, so he owns a house, but he has to pay for it costs money to own a house. It says that the more you own, the more daigas you have. So a person owns a house, it costs money. It starts leaking, it costs money. So there's on the other hand, someone rents, so the expense is very clear. You pay a certain amount per month, and that's it. So, in other words, we were in Kollel, so the question was, you rent. So then they hit you up for higher tuition. Why do they hit you up for higher tuition? Because you don't have so much expenses. It's a very clear amount, how much you have there. And so you say, well, listen, I want to buy a house. I have to save up for a down payment. I need $150,000. That's what you need today for a down payment. You have to start saving up. So, but they don't take that into account. They just take on what's on the paper here. So that was one of the complaints. But it's a good question. Let's say a person, he wants to save up for a house. So normal living expenses may include a person having a roof over his head as a normal living expense. So, and maybe renting is not so, you're not grounded so much. You don't have anything to fall back on. A person has a house, he goes to fall back, he goes to be mortgaged. There's always a stability that a person needs. So the question is, how do you reckon a person's making ends meet for Maaser? It's a good question. It's a question that tuition was up. It's a good question for Maaser also. How much is mechuyev? So each situation a person should really ask a shaila. But the Maaser person's allowed to keep a certain standard of living. Kids don't have to wear shabby stuff. They could wear clothing. It doesn't have to be newest. It doesn't have to be the latest thing. It could be maybe even hand-me-downs. The question is, it's whatever's accepted in the community, whatever's accepted that he should be able to live with. So that's the standard of living. And if a person's not making that, then technically he doesn't have a chiyuv according to many poskim. He doesn't have a chiyuv to take off Maaser.
So it's a community that you're part of, not like Toronto is a very diverse number of communities.
Yeah.
Even in the Bayat, there would be.
It's hard to give an exact definition. It's hard to give an exact definition. But a person needs $50,000 a year to live on the lower standard. 40,000, 50, whatever level he's holding. I mean, the kids he has, he's holding. Every person's holding a different stage. So if a person's not making enough to cover his basic expenses, then he's not making enough. He's going to start giving out Maaser. He's not making enough to. Now again, there are shittas that hold no. He could live with 10% less. Also, he might have to tighten his belt a little and not have chicken during the week. I don't know. So maybe he's mechuyev to tighten his belt and live there. And it's definitely a stula. He maybe become rich. I'm not saying, but to be mechayev someone. It seems that the general sak is that the person has to be able to be making the general standard of living. Now, on that note, there is a lot of gray area here because, let's say a person has an investment. Okay, a person has an investment, and he's put away, and he has an investment, and he's bringing in some income on that investment. So it's. So really, he's making a just, but he's putting away. He wants to put away money. Let's say he wants to put away money to buy a house. He wants to put away money for expenses that come up at a later date. A person has to think a little bit into the future, a little bit. At least to the end of the year. You have to have money for a rainy day. You have to have money in case you the house starts leaking. The person needs a little bit. So. It's not really that a person should. Now, if a person will take off Maaser, the problem is like this: that once a person's over the threshold, it's not a problem, but the issue is like this: once a person's over the threshold, let's say his living expenses is $50,000 a year, okay, and he's making $55,000 a year, so he just technically he's mechuyev to take off Maaser on the entire amount he's making. Not just 5,000 extra. You can't deduct living expenses. Whatever you're making, you have to take off Maaser from. So he has to take Maaser from the full amount. So that might throw him back down below this threshold, you know. So every case is specific. A person should ask, but if it's not possible for him to take off Maaser, he's still, especially if that money maybe he still needs that money, he may use it. It's not like it's beyond the living expenses. So it's min haroi that a person should at least take off Maaser from the gains, even if he's not in a position to take off Maaser from his full income, but at least from the gains, a person should always be taking off Maaser. A person should be in the mode of taking off tzedakah. Moshe writes this. So a person should always be taking off Maaser of something. So even if he's not possible from taking everything, he should at least take off from the gains. Even though Mikra Adin, the chi of taking off is from everything.
So in that example you just gave, you're going to be taking off Maaser from the 5,000, is it 55?
He should. If he's putting away money, at least he should take off money from that. Even though he's not in the, his person who's not maybe in the, he's struggling, he's not in the parsha of taking off full Maaser, but at least from money that he's putting away, he should get used to. We should put away, take off Maaser. Moshe has a shiloh. Someone got an adun, someone got his, he got married, and his in-laws put away for him is was $10,000 in those days, put away from him to use over the years. So there's a question: is he mechuyev to take off Maaser, or is he mechuyev to take off Maaser? So Moshe has a whole tshuva that it was meant for his living expenses, and his. This is another question. If it was given, we'll get to this later, it was given specifically for a purpose. It wasn't given that he should take off Maaser, because if you want to take off Maaser, I have to give more. Mama says, if you want to take off Maaser, I'm giving you, then I'm going to have to start paying you more. I already took off Maaser, So maybe this is the Maaser. Maybe this is the Maaser he's giving. So anyway, Moshe has a shayla, but at least from the gains from this money, if he puts some away, at least from the revach that grows from that, he should for sure take off Maaser, even though he may not be mechuyev to take off Maaser himself. The son-in-law, he doesn't have really a parnasa and is just using living expenses. At least that amount he should take off. A person should get used to take off Maaser.
When you say they should get used to, is it a halachic thing, a psychological thing, a habit thing, like to develop good?
Again, so these things aren't clear what when a person is within the chiyuv and not within the chiyuv. So it's part the person should be giving a certain amount of tzedakah, so he should give Maaser from the revach.
Where are the paying off debts fit into this?
Good question.
Into this financial picture.
Yeah, so where is paying off debts? It's a good question. A mortgage is a debt. Everybody has a mortgage. You mean that kind of debt? Something which is what?
Well, maybe let's say a gemach.
Well, gemach, borrowing money. Yeah. So it's a good question. So the truth is today, if it's a debt was payable right away, so he's mechuyev to pay that. He's mechuyev to pay off his debts. It's a chiyuv he has.
Which would
pay it off.
supersede the.
It would be part of his living expenses. It would go into his living expenses. So, but usually most of these are monthly payments. Right? Whether it's a mortgage, you have a monthly payment for the mortgage. It's hard to look. I mean, it is a debt, but that's your living expense. You're living in a house. It costs you the amount of your mortgage, and that's what it costs. So it's so usually you put it. I'm saying always, but usually it's put into the living expenses what it costs you for the yearly for your living.
Rabbi, if you buy a really, really nice house, you have a large mortgage on it, and then suddenly your business turns not so good.
Yeah.
Right? Are you now obligated to sell, even though the house is a good investment, it's a good area, it's a good house, whatever, it's going up in value? Are you obligated now to sell your house?
This is not obligated to sell his house. This is not obligated. I'm not talking about if he's.
I'm talking about he's bought a really nice house.
He's bought it's an extra large,
Extra large.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
Yeah. And now he's coming on hard times and he can't pay it off. Now
he can pay it off, but now he can't give Maaser, right?
Oh, he can't give Maaser.
So now, is he obligated now to sell?
It's hard to say he's obligated to sell possessions that he has in order to give Maaser. It's hard to say he's obligated to.
He is.
No. It's his house. It's his house. He's not mechuyev to sell his possessions in order to give tzedakah. Now the problem is that he doesn't really own it. he has a mortgage on it and has to pay off every month. So, yeah, but he doesn't have the cash available. The only way you take off Maaser what cash you have available. Let's hold off. Let's go on this point here. Let's say a person has an investment. Okay, so he buys a house for investment purposes. Okay, so first of all, it's machlokes. Let's take it from the bottom level. Let's say a person gets a present. He gets a silver kais as a present. Okay, someone presents him. It's worth a couple $100. He gets that as a present. So does he have to take off Maaser from it? A person has to take off Maaser from presents. If he gets a $10,000 cash present, he has to take off Maaser from it. It's like anything else. But let's say he gets an object. An object is Maaser. So Shabbos almost says, yeah, you have to take off Maaser from it. But most poskim seem to go not like that. You're not mechuyev to take off Maaser because you're not mechuyev to sell. You're not mechuyev to sell the object. It's nechasna. I don't have to sell it. You only have to take off Maaser from a monetary gain you have. But something which I have, if someone gives me a present and I have it, I don't have to sell it. If someone you have to break the kais and take a piece off and give it to Maaser, you don't have to do that. So you have to sell it and take a tenth of the money. You're not mechuyev to do that. The person's not mechuyev to sell his.
Is that what Rabbi Orban was suggesting? They have to. I don't get it.
So it's not clear. I didn't have a safer on there. I just saw it put down. Take $20. It's worth $200. Take $20 and give it to Stucker. Yeah,
right.
That's
But if he did sell it,
so the question is, if you do sell it, if you do end up turning it over and selling it, so it's also unclear. But there are those that say then he should, if he turns it into cash, so then he should take off Maaser from that. As long as it's not cash, it's not turned over, it seems the general consensus in the poskim is you don't have to take a Maaser off it. It's mustaver. You're not going to take off Maaser on possessions. And even if you sell it, it's not so clear. But many poskim say then he should take off Maaser. Now, if a person, let's say, buys something, he buys a house. Okay, he buys a house that was worth $200,000, and now after 5 years, it's worth $600,000. He's there. He made $400,000. He bought before the markets went up, and now he's a rich man. So he has to now. He made $400,000, so he has to start taking off now Maaser, $40,000 Maaser.
Why?
I'm asking.
Why would he? There's no cash. It's only a theoretical gain.
Oh, so as long as he's living in the house, there's no question. Like we're saying, he's living in the house. But here's even more than getting it as a present. This is my possession. I'm getting it as a present. It went up in value. Who said I'm mechuyev to take off Maaser something that goes up in value? It's my possession. I own it.
The real question is, the guy who now has a $600,000 house goes and buys another house.
Wait. Slow down. Slow. So I have a house that went up in value. Who said I'm mechuyev? I saw someone to say stocks. I buy stocks. Yeah, I buy stocks, and then it goes up. I make a nice amount of money. Who said I have to take off Maaser? I bought. Let's say I bought stocks and whatever I bought.
we bought that with the intent on getting.
Hold on. But I bought. Let's say I bought. Gold. Gold is money. Maybe I bought oil. I don't know. And then commodities. And then it went up. So my possessions went up. So it's not so clear. What?
Isn't that like the farmer? He takes an amount of seed, plants it, and gets.
So if the chiyuv is like Maaser, real Maaser, if it's a chiyuv deraisa like real Maaser, that's what we said last week. So then you're right. Then you take 10% of everything. You don't even account the expenses you put in. But today, where it's a minhag Maaser, it's not a real chiyuv. But the farmer is not allowed to deduct the seeds that he put in, right? But we deduct, which I didn't get to yet, but we deduct the expenses put into the business. If there's a direct expense in the business, I don't have to count that. Let's say my business made $100,000, but it costed me 30 expenses to put in, so I could deduct that. It's the net gain. I don't have to. If I was taking Maaser from the field, I have to take off the $100,000. I don't care. I put seeds in. I still have to go Maaser. But right, that's how it worked in those days when they gave Maaser. But today it's a minhag, so the minhag is so it's different. You take from the revach, from the gain. The revach is considered. If I put things in, it's considered. But the question is how you judge everything. So I have a house and it goes up in value. So it's my house went up in value. So it's a question. It's a question. It's a question. Is that a chiyuv? Do I have a chiyuv take off now? Now, obviously, if I don't sell it, I don't have to take off my. But I go sell it now. I go sell the house, and now I have cash.
And then you
What?
rent something as opposed to buying again?
Then I rent. Then I rent.
But that's complicated because
I retire. I move into a smaller apartment. You know, I sell my $1.2 million house, and I move into a small. I buy a little condo for $200,000. Okay, so I deduct $200,000. I had to buy a condo, so I'm left with the $1 million. So I take off my shit.
But what if that's your retirement money? I mean, you're no longer going to be earning income.
I'm not talking about living expenses. I'm talking about chiyuv maaser. If the guy doesn't have money, he needs it to live. That's
Or what
another
happens if
question.
somebody's making aliyah? He's made money in this house, but he's going to go buy another house. That's
Yeah, 1 second. So if the guy's, let's take one step at a time. The guy's not buying another house. This money is clear, and he has saved up money for his retirement. He has, it's clear-cut reva.
I wanna meet
Okay,
that
let's
guy.
cut out all the outside
I'll
factors.
extraneous.
Why would you have a havamina that it should be different than your earnings from from your job?
I would have a havamina that's different, and I saw he speaks about it, Bloy, that maybe it's my own possessions that went up in value. It wasn't a business deal transaction. Well, Maisa, the price going to say should take off Maisa, but you have to. Moshe says you have to factor in the inflation. In other words, I bought the house 10 years ago, and now it's worth $800,000 more. Very nice, but the cost of chicken went up. Everything went up. You know, the cost of living went up. It changed. It varied.
When Moshe was writing, the inflation was important. Now we have 1% inflation, or maybe sometimes negative inflation.
You have to work it out. You have to work it out. You have to speak to a financial guy. You have to figure out, how much I really gained, because it's totally now. This is a very interesting shiloh.
If you're paying a mortgage, though, if you buy a house
Yeah.
for $200,000, by the time you finish paying it, you really paid $400,000 or $500,000.
Now, there's another point. The money I put into the house, I've been paying over the years interest plus the thing. So that amount I for sure could deduct. That wasn't a revach that I paid in. I paid into the house. I paid into the house.
Interest payment.
I paid in interest payments. I paid payments. I paid in. Now, even though that's the benefits of buying over renting, because when you rent, you pay and it goes nowhere. And when you buy, it pays. At least some of it goes into the house. But whatever you have to know if you could count the interest payment. Maybe you can only count the cost of what goes in. You have to know what you could deduct.
Why can't you count the interest?
There's the amount you have to live every year also that it costs, but there's the amount that goes into the house for buying the house. How much went into the purchase of the house itself?
Maintenance and upkeep?
Maintenance and upkeep,
You're differentiating
There's,
maintenance and upkeep, except the interest on the money that you borrowed to pay for the house. That's an expense. If I did a business, let's think
But did you deduct that weekly? Did you deduct
You're
that
living in the
yearly?
house also. Forget you're also living. It's not a business.
Did you count
Something
that
that you
as
have as a
living expense
business
on a yearly
is just for business.
Did you count that as a yearly expense?
it's expensive.
So you're counting it twice?
No, I'm not counting it
Right,
twice.
you're counting it twice.
I'm not talking about counting it twice.
You're living in the house. You're counting it twice.
Otherwise you're paying rent.
Yeah.
So let me just finish. Let me say, when I buy a house, I borrow. Let's say let me take numbers easy. I borrow $100,000 on that house, and let's say I never pay down that $100,000. Okay,
Right.
so every year, and the interest rate's at 5%, so that's $5,000 a year. After 10 years, I put $50,000 into just. It cost me $50,000
To live
just
in the
for the right to own that house. Because I borrowed that money.
Yeah.
So that $50,000, if it was an investment house, I would count that as part of my expenses.
If you invest, it definitely count it as part of the expenses.
Sorry?
If it's an investment, you would definitely count it as part of your expenses.
So what's the difference between that?
The question is if you're living in the house, so you also there's living expenses, and you're counting it as your living expenses every year. Every year you make a cheshbon, how much money you have to give to Maaser, and you say, well,
You deduct that $5,000 each year,
Right.
then you can't deduct it at the end of it.
Yeah, the truth is you're not allowed to really deduct it every year either.
Right,
So
so
you're
then
allowed
you
to
should
deduct
be
it if you're
able
not
to-
making enough to pay Maaser.
A lot of people
Okay,
look at
each
it.
specific you have to ask. I'm just trying to give the column over here.
Rabbi?
So if you have an investment, yeah,
I have a question before we get too far away. In the discussion of the father-in-law and the son-in-law, is the responsibility of the chayav on the money or on the individual? That is to say, could Maaser be taken off twice?
Yeah, Maaser is taken off twice. If I give someone,
it's on the
if I give
individual,
someone
it's not
Maaser, it's on the individual. The only question is if it was given for that purpose.
Right.
So I don't have to give it again. So okay, you have to really work out the dollars and cents. But so that's one question. If the house goes up in value, the Maaser then it gets to take off if deducting the expenses that incurred in buying the house and what you paid over the time, and then you sell it, and inflation. So it's very interesting. True about Moshe. Let's say he says, normally I don't know if I don't want Hazav, what's called Tiva, what's called Kesef. But for example, what's stable and what fluctuates. If let's say the dollar, okay, I have $1. So if I borrow from someone $100, then I pay him back. I just pay him back in 5 years. If I borrow from a guy $1,000, I pay him back in 5 years. I give him $1,000. Okay, the $1,000 in 5 years may not be worth the same amount as the $1,000 5 years back. So the question is, what was stable? So I'm asking, well, you're paying less back. So let's say what was stable, and what fluctuated. If the food, if the food fluctuated, so my buying power is less today, but what's stable is the money, and everything else. The Gemara says the kesef is stable, and the other things fluctuate. Or do we say, well, it's not like that? In finance, it's not like that. It's money maybe is only the buying power, so maybe the money changes. So maybe I owe the guy more than $1,000. Maybe I owe the guy $1,200. Maybe $1,200 today is what $1,000 was worth then. I borrowed the money, I have to pay him. We know it's not like that. We know a person pays back $1,200. So Moshe has a whole tshuva how kesef works. It's different than in the old days where it was silver or gold. Today it's just paper. It really has no intrinsic value. Who's going to get money from the government? Take a dollar bill in and try to get money. It's not going to work. So here's all how it works. But basically, he says a very interesting svara. He says that when it comes to money dealings, so there's a dina de malchus dina. So in other words, in the Canadian law, if you borrow $10,000, you pay $10,000. If there's an interest change, okay, there's an interest change, but that doesn't make you mechuyev on the loan to pay up more. I pay up whatever the dollar is. So since I'm in Dina Malchus, I don't have to pay back more, even if in reality the money fluctuated and it's not worth as much because technically the buying power is less. It's really, in Dina tell you it's not worth as much, but since I'm only mechuyev to pay you back the $10,000 that I borrowed, not more, so anything I give you extra is ribbis. Since Dina Malchus Dina means I only pay that amount, so anything extra is considered ribbis. I can't pay you back more.
With that scenario, who are you paying back?
Let's say I borrowed from you $10,000, and over 5 years now I'm giving it back to you. But it's worth less. 10 years, it's worth less.
The dollar went down in value?
The dollar went down in value. Everything went down. The purchasing power. Inflation. The purchasing power went down.
That's what he's using as the...
You could buy 2 tomatoes with it.
So even though we didn't tell you, maybe I really should owe you more, but he said in today's dollars, because they don't really have any real value by itself. So, but Alpha became, since Dina Malchus Dina, I only have to pay you back that amount, so anything I would give you extra would be considered ribbis. But he says that does not apply for Hilchos Maaser. For Hilchos Maaser, since there's a loss involved because the money is worth less, you can't compare over the years. The value definitely keeps on going down. The Rosh has an interesting story why the value keeps on going down. He says, because it's only paper. Every year you don't get paid. Someone owes you money, you don't get paid. Let's say I have a star, right? I have a star from someone who owes me money. And then this person is unreliable. Over time we start seeing that he's unreliable. So his star is not worth so much anymore. It's not worth as much as it was when I first borrowed from him. So it's not worth the same amount. This is the same thing with the dollars. You see, the governments are not as stable. So anyways, the value goes down. It keeps on going down for many different reasons. So Dina Malchus Dina, I could still pay back my loan with it. But as far as Maaser goes, I could cheshbon that in to my calculations of how much I'm really making.
So the problem with that sugya is that in the laws of the land, interest is permitted, which covers those issues.
But Torah is not permitted. So I can't.
I know.
Din Malchusa doesn't allow me to pay interest.
But what I'm saying is that
Yeah.
when you're leaning on the laws of the land and you're only leaning on a portion of it,
Yeah. Because
then it's not an
without
objective
interest, if I
statement.
make a transaction without interest, the law of the land is I have to pay it. We're not allowed to make a ribbis transaction. So I make a transaction without ribbis. I borrow 10. I make a star.
but the
I
law
owe
of the
10.
land does allow.
But I didn't do
ribbis,
that. I
right?
didn't make a ribbis because I'm not allowed, right? So I didn't make such a transaction. Yeah. So, anyways, these are factors to take in. So if I buy a house, in other words, and I'm selling it, so the question is, if I'm buying a house and I sell it and I rebuy, I take that money and I buy another house. So since it's really, you can cheshbon the sin, since it's really only my value of my house that went up, it wasn't like, if I do a business deal, and then I want to use that money to buy a house, there's no question I have to take off Maaser first, and then I buy the house. I made money, and now I'm taking off Maaser, I'm buying a house. But let's say I bought one house, and now I'm selling it, and I'm going to turn that money over to buy another house. So then, I don't have to take off Maaser, because it's all just reusing the house. It's not like I really made money. It's not like I really made money and now I'm buying a house. I just...
Good
But
transaction.
you're buying a bigger house.
But I'm using the same... I'm not taking any from the pocket. I'm using the same house. I'm turning it into another
Even though
house.
the house went up in value?
The house went up in value and I turn it over. Eventually I sell the next house. At the end of the day, when I sold my last house...
Only when you downsize do you have to pay.
Yeah.
But you know, there's a logical problem that you're assuming that the house that's assuming the house isn't an investment. The house is an investment.
I'm talking about living. You're living in
No,
the
I
house.
understand, but why couldn't I just say? I mean, I want to argue the other side for a second. Why couldn't I say that the rent for this house is X amount of dollars per month, right? And that's what I should have been paying. Anything above that, the fact that I lived in it, didn't live in it, blah, blah, blah. In the end, I have this asset. The asset went up in value. I have to be using the asset.
Yeah, but when I sell it at the end, when I'm not using it anymore, when I'm selling it at the end.
I'm not taking this house and swapping this house for that house. I'm swapping this house for money. I'm taking the money.
You don't look at it like that. You don't look at it like that. It's not like you made a separate cash. It's my own house that went up in value.
But I end up with the cash in my pocket.
No, I don't. I'm still living in the next
No,
house.
it goes into my bank account it goes into the trust account for the lawyer.
Yeah, I'm just sitting over here. Okay, so the same thing is with stocks, let's say. You know, the question is, there's no question, let's say I buy an investment. I buy and I sell, right? So you're constantly buying and selling. So when you take off Maaser, each sale you have to take off. You know, if a person, make a cheshbon, if a person takes off from each sale, so every time it goes up, he takes off. Every time it goes down, he loses money. Then it goes up again, he takes off. What's the cutoff for? How does he do it? So there's a lot, yeah. So again, you have the same issue. So if it's... So one thing is clear. If it's you just give the money in and you let the guy take care of it, and so you can make one cheshbon at the end of the year, make a year cutoff date, make the cheshbon of your total gain, and you can take off Maaser on that amount. Because again, it's not cash in the pocket. It's just from one investment to the next. What?
You're not using cash for vacation.
Yeah, you're not getting the cash out. Now, sometimes you do. Sometimes you do get cash out. So whatever cash comes out, that should be Maaser. But anything that stays in, that keeps on going, a person can make a cheshbon. If it's can make a cheshbon once a year.
From stocks, you haven't made any money really until you've sold it, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if it goes up, you pay your Maaser, and then it crashes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's why the person should have a cutoff point, and at that cutoff point, that's what it is. And the next thing is in the next year's cheshbon. It's like taxes. Goes into the next year's cheshbon.
If you compare it to the house.
If you don't sell it, but once you sell it...
living in...
No, but if in the case of the house, if you sell it and use that money to buy another house, then you're not in a situation where you're paying Maaser.
Even if you're not getting any money out at all.
Right.
If you're not getting any money out at all, it's just staying there for 20 years. Yeah. Something was just like staying at 20 years, investments are staying in, and it's going, and you're not taking anything out of it. So, technically a person, it's a shayla in the place, but technically a person could just leave it there and take off at the end. Take off at the end. But many times you switch. You pull out of one thing and you start putting into the next thing. Many times you're not leaving it in one thing. There's another shayla, for example. Many times you have two different investments. One gains and one loses. Yes, so it's the whole question. If you have to, let's say a person have two separate businesses, totally two separate businesses. One's making money, one's losing money. So You have to take off one Maaser ala kol, or could you, that one that's making, you have to take off Maaser, one that's losing, you don't. It's also a question. It's also a question. The best thing is that when a person, since we said it's a minhag, so a person could accept upon himself the Maaser in a certain way, right? Because he's accepting upon himself the chiyuvim, so he could accept it upon himself that he's going to take off one net over the whole thing, and as long as it equals out, you have the same cutoff date, work it out, and it takes off one on ala kol. Because otherwise it could get complicated, each venture.
And with stock, you have a cut-off point each year. Do you count also paper gains, or just the stock that you sold and bought?
So as I was saying, it could be you could just count the ones you sold and cashed in, but the ones that are just on the paper, if you want to leave that till the end and cheshbon everything at the end, you could, if he never got anything, he never got any money from it, he never got anything, so it could be it's like a house, you never.
Maybe you keep the stock 5-10 years each, and you don't sell too much.
Yeah.
When you sell one, there will be a big gain, but the other you don't sell.
Yeah.
And in that case, do you also take into account inflation for the gain?
You could take account inflation, sure. A person could take account inflation.
When
Yeah.
the Chachamim developed all of these halachos regarding this minhag, so did they model it after Maaser? Because it doesn't sound like it.
That's what I'm saying.
Real Maaser?
It's not like real
Because he had
Maaser.
two fields. One
Right.
one was,
Making,
bountiful,
one
and the
wasn't
other
making.
one was
That's
bad.
right. Real
You
Maaser is
still have to
you
give
still have to
Maaser on
take
the
off
good
Maaser.
field.
That's right.
And in the case that he asked about where you the father-in-law took the Maaser off of it, and now he gives the money to it would be real Maaser. So then it's already been Maaser.
Right,
You wouldn't have
right.
the Maaser twice.
Right,
So
right,
that's
right.
two cases where it doesn't.
Right. But
follow
this is a
the-
different template. Here the Maaser is off the gains. It's not a Maaser on the. It's a Maaser ksafim. So the Maaser is on the gains. It's not on the. It's not on the cash. So this dollar has to have a piece taken off of it. The food, you take off some tvor, you take 10%, you take it off. So this food is not tevel anymore, But here it's not working like that. It's on gains you're taking off. It's on each individual. So that's the general. There are different details in it, but it's kedai when a person takes off the Maaser that when he makes he does it in a way he accepts it upon himself in a way that works for him. So he accepts it upon himself that he's going to take off once a year from everything together, and do it like that.
Do we do this on anything else?
Why?
It's a very strange thing. It works for me. Right. This works for me. I'll do it this
because
way.
it's like an edu. It's what you makabel. How you makabel it. So since it is a machlokes, a paiskim,
and
how
it's
to
because it's not
deal.
a halacha.
It's a machlokes a paiskim. So you can be makabel it in a certain knife and.
It's practice for doing it properly. I think it's just practice for doing it properly when the time.
So what could you? I just want to end off with this. There's another story, but I'm not going to get into it. There's not enough time. But I just want to answer the point here that what are you allowed to deduct? What are you not allowed to deduct? So this is clear. A person's own personal living expenses he cannot deduct. Whatever a person's making, if he's making $100,000 a year and it costs him $50,000 a year to live, you can't deduct it. You have to take off Maaser from the full $100,000. That doesn't take off. But what you could deduct is the expenses that are put into the investment, put into the business. Business expenses a person's allowed to deduct.
Where's tax fitting?
Tax is definitely allowed to take off. Tax, you're not. That's money not gained. Tax, let's say a person pays taxes, so whatever he's paying you're taking up the net gain. That's not part of your net gain. That goes to the government, for the Catholic schools. But it's taken away from you. You're not even willingly paying it. It's almost like the Gemara says, "Anasim." They take the money away from you, so they're taking it away. So it's not, it's not part of my what I'm gaining. So the taxes, I have to pay taxes, so that's not included. But business expenses also. Let's say you need. It costs money to develop a business, to develop things. So these expenses could be deducted from the gain. It's different than living expenses that can't be deducted. Many people on taxes will say, "Oh, I have my car as part of my business expense, and the write-off all the gas is that." It may work for the
Revenue Canada.
Revenue Canada, yeah, but for halacha, that's living expenses. That's what you have for living. But the business expense, what you're putting in, that's you're allowed to take that off because it's not a net gain. You're investing money in order to make money, so the money you're investing is not included in your gains.
Do you deal with tuition yet? Or?
Yes, I wanted to deal with tuition. I don't know if I have enough time to get into it. What's that called? So again, whatever's living expenses, I can't deduct. So the halacha is like this. We mentioned last week as dvarim shebechayva, things which I'm mechuyev to pay for. That's not. I can't take that off my meiser. I can't even use that as stucca. In other words, if I'm mechuyev to pay something, if I owe somebody money, so I can't pay with stucca money when I owe. I owe it. Let's say even if I owe it to an ani, but I owe him the money. So I can't use stucca to pay off a chayv I owe. So technically, if I owe tuition, so I'm not allowed to use meiser money to pay what I owe, and that's regular living expenses. Now, it's living expenses, so, if I'm not making ends meet because I have a lot of tuition, so I'm not making ends meet, I'm not mechuyev meiser. But if I am mechuyev meiser, I'm making more, I am mechuyev meiser, so technically, I wouldn't be able to deduct tuition. Now, there's a machlokes the shach and the taz. The shach says, like we mentioned once before, that any kid over 6 years old, I'm not mechuyev to support. I'm not mechuyev to support him anymore. So if I'm not mechuyev to support him, any money I'm giving, it's tzedakah. It's mfush halacha. It's mfush halacha that bonim agdolim, the money I give is tzedakah.
Six, right?
What? Six. Yeah. So the money I'm giving is tzedakah. So the Taz argues. The Taz says that anyone that in society today that we support. That's called the mechuyev to support, and that's not tzedakah. So now, how we paskin is a question. When they get tzedakah, it is considered tzedakah giving, But as far as taking off meiser, what my chiyuv and my meiser is, Moshe says at Avada, whatever's normally supported in today's society, that's part of my living expenses. So when we come to schools, you have to know what your chiyuv is. What is my chiyuv? So some say, okay, so my chiyuv is to teach Torah, to mikra, whatever my chiyuv is. Anything extra beyond that, I'm not mechuyev. Lamed umnus doesn't mean he has to sit through a whole English program for 20 years. It doesn't have to be. So whatever I'm paying extra beyond the expense of what I'm mechuyev al pidin, so that's maybe not maybe that's stock. I'm giving it to the yeshiva. Money I don't have to pay. That would all be very nice if I wouldn't get a bill in the mail saying that I owe them. It's a chayv. It's like any business. If I want to send my child somewhere and they make a deal that I have to pay them, so it's a chiyuv. I'm a kabbalah on myself a chiyuv. I have to pay it. It's dvarim shebechayv. So technically, I'm not allowed to use the meiser.
But you are getting a tax receipt. You are getting a donation.
Okay, I get a tax receipt. Yeah.
It
helps that I don't have to pay the tax, but the bottom line is that I have a chiyuv to pay the school whether I get a tax receipt or not. I have a chiyuv to pay the school.
But what the tax receipt is breaking up is how much of it is what they consider tzedakah.
I understand. No. Yeah, but that's like but
part of the CRA.
Yeah. So, but there's two factors here. One factor is so let's leave that aside. So for that I could tell the school when I make the deal. Okay, listen, I don't want to owe you any money. I'll pay you for tuition, $1,000 a year. The rest of the money I'll give you from meiser, But I'll collect money for you. I'll get you meiser. I'll get you stucca money. But I'm not being mechayev a personal chiyuv. In other words, at the end of the year, if I don't have meiser, I don't have to give it. I'm not making a personal chiyuv for it. Maybe I could do that. But the question is like this. The question is that let's say, for example, Moshe says bonus. I'm not mechuyev to teach him Torah. So maybe to the Beis Yaakov I could pay meiser money to. I'm not mechuyev to send it. But he says it's not so, because since the government forces people have to send the children to school, he says it's very interesting. If you don't give a proper Jewish upbringing in a proper school, so then they're going to end up having to go to schools which are not proper. The government forces it. And even if they don't have to go, they'll end up in the street. That's the way it is today. So it's a part of your chiyuvim as a parent to ensure that the child has a proper upbringing, and that doesn't go in b'chlal. That's your own chiyuvim. It's your own personal chiyuv. So tuition technically is your chiyuv. You have to make sure he's in school. It's your chiyuv, and therefore you technically can't use meiser money. So what's the eitzah? Tuition is very high, What's the eitzah? So there's two things.
We're all in
Well, if you're on some people aren't on even after tuition. So first, I was listening to a share from Rabbi Miller, and he was once sent a letter a long time ago to Rabbi Yashiv about the Shaila. He holds very strongly that the chiyuv of schools is not a chiyuv on the individual. The chiyuv of schools is a chiyuv on the community. I'm sure Magamla was Masakan Takana, that the community, just like a chiyuv mikvah, this community has to build a mikvah. It's not my personal chiyuv to build a mikvah. Let's say there's a building fund for a shul. A community has to have a shul. They have to have a mikvah. There's a building fund for a mikvah. So the community, today we don't have laws where we can be mechayiv someone, but technically the community can be mechayiv a tax for every individual to pay towards the mikvah, towards the shuls, towards the schools. A community has to have a school. And therefore you can have a person who's a very big veer, and he has no children in the school. And you can have someone who has 25 kids, and he has no money, and he has 25 kids in the school. That doesn't mean that the person with 25 kids has to spend more money than the gvir. It's a head tax. The way the chiyuv is shtel is a head tax on the community has to, and a person living in a community, it's a socialist, the Torah has
it's what the government does with the Catholic
It's what the government does. So it's the same thing with Jewish schools. So this person who's paying, and it's hard to enforce today, so you can have this, not giving any, my kid doesn't go to the school, I'm not paying any money. The community needs schools. So he has a chiyuv to pay money. And the father who has a bunch of kids, if he can't afford it, he is paying the chayv of this gvir, that he's not paying for the school. So therefore it's not so clear that his obligation of tuition is $20,000. It's not like that. His obligation of tuition is whatever's decided in the Beis Din, how much, according to what his means are, how much he's mechuyev to pay to the schools. That's what his chiyuv is. Anything above and beyond that chiyuv is allowed to use Maaser money for. So if a person is paying very high tuition, it's very possible that a good percentage of it he could use Maaser money for, because could be it's beyond his chiyuv. Proportionally, according to how many people are living in Toronto, it's very hard to know these things, but definitely there's a certain amount, not definitely, depending on how much he's paying. Let's say it works out that it should make sense that a person should pay $5,000 tuition, an average household for schools. So anything beyond that could be as, I'm just giving a number, could be as, according to Rabbi Miller, that's what he holds, could be used as for Maaser money. Okay, we'll pause here. There's a few other cheshbonos, but I think we're running over time.
So what age is the chiyuv in? Like you talked about, like we have an obligation to educate.
It works the other way also. Let's say for a mikvah fund, you have to give money for mikvah. Could I use the Maaser money? No, it's my chiyuv. I have a chiyuv to give money towards a fund. Lav dafka I use my Maaser for that. It works both ways. Certain things is a chiyuv to do, and certain things is tzedakah. You have to know what goes in the obligation and what goes in the tzedakah. That's a question of membership. For a certain amount, the person's mechuyev to pay. He has to pay, and beyond that is could be used as stock. And now again, if a person's having a hard time making ends meet and paying membership, he's not mechuyev Maaser anyways. So definitely he could separate Maaser and use that money towards all these things, because he's anyways not in the threshold mikvah. But if a person is, he has to know what's a chiyuv and what's stock.
Good.